Hi, I'm Abigail Cloud. I'm the editor-in-chief of Mid-American Review, and I teach at Bowling Green State University. And today we're going to walk through some chance operations to create poems. You can use all of these exercises for prose also, especially if you don't hold exactly to the exercise of using only the words that you pull out of your chance operations. These exercises can provide inspiration for a poem, or they can provide the actual raw material, or you can go all in and in fact use the only the words that come out of these exercises. I first got interested in chants as a form of artistic creation when I was taking a choreography and modern dance class one summer at Michigan State, where I was an undergrad. We had learned a sequence of movements, and then we went away with the express purpose of turning those movements, twisting them, putting them in other parts of our bodies. So, for instance, if we learned a head roll, what if we turn that into a rolling of the hips? Or what if we turn that into a simple hand roll or something? So all of us came back, and then the chance part came into play. There was a pile of cassettes. Yep, cassettes on a table. We each had to pick one, and then that was going to be our music for our chance operations. The results were wild. Most of us had picked something that was so obscurely right, so strangely right, to go with our choreography. And I actually still wish I had my cassette tape, because the music was actually sound, and there was a part that sounded like an orchestral warming up period set against a very grating violin sound. It was really right, and I think about it all the time, how strange it was to see these sequences of movements that we had created set with this sound that we had no idea about beforehand. It lent a real emotional thrum to our movements. We could interpret into the language of movement that we were creating with our bodies. We did that as dancers, as we were performing our movements, but also as audience members, as we were taking on the movement and the sound for the very first time. That's also what happens in poetry chants, when you have this sequence of words that kind of come out of nowhere, and you look at them all together and they start having implications. They start giving you a vibe that you can then run with for the rest of your poem, or for even more work beyond that. So we'll walk through a couple of exercises, some completely based on chance and some with a little bit more of the human element thrown in. The first exercise deals with a text, any text. It can come from anywhere, it could even be in another language. The task is to scan through the text, to highlight or underline words that just spring to your attention. What words pop out immediately into your brain, giving your brain a little spike of inspiration. So this particular exercise is not so much based on complete chance, because of course you're thinking about letter combinations that commonly spring to your eyes. It can be really hard to actually make your brain focus completely on just chance. It's a little bit easier if you just allow your eyes to settle, but sometimes that can be super difficult if you're distracted easily like I am and have an eye that wants to really think about what it's seeing on the page. And then the next step is to write down all of the words that you have grabbed out of the text. So list 1, words from a text. You could use those and only those to create a poem or a piece of prose, or you can add in additional words. That's what I like to do. I like to see the implications and create. So the second exercise, I'm going to use Perquacky, the game Perquacky. You can do this with any letter tiles or letter dice that you have. I sometimes will use a bananagrams pouch where you're kind of pushing everything together and forming words out of a whole batch. But I do also like Perquacky because it comes with an egg timer that I also subsequently ignore. So with Perquacky, you have this little cup of dice. You pour them out, and then you're supposed to make words of varying lengths with only the letters that you come up with. If you have fewer letter dice, you could come up with words that only start with the letters involved. With the Perquacky game, of course, you're limited because you have a whole batch of dice, and if you use them all together, then you really are quite limited in what you have. But you can also think about different combinations of those letters. You can use only some of those letters. You can randomize what you do with those letters. There are a lot of different options. Usually I like to go through this 3 times. I like to try a couple different combinations. Some are more helpful than others. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. My second draw, I got a Q. That's never a great move. I only have an H, E, and an O. I like to have an A or something in there to help things out, move things along. I sometimes call exercises like these word bank exercises because that's essentially what you're doing. You're creating a word bank like you might have had when you were a kid and needing to do a word search or some other kind of puzzle. But I like a word bank because, as I said before, it gives you a sense of prodding. We all have a certain collection of words that we use in our brains, that we have in our brains, and that we're thinking about. And these types of exercises, especially where you have letters that you might not otherwise use, you have the opportunity to come up with words or really dig for words that you might not otherwise have. I wouldn't normally use the word hammer in a poem, so that might work. That could work for me. I also probably wouldn't use the word quay, but that's a word that is now on my list, and it might spark a memory, give me an idea. Maybe a combination would give me an idea that I can use to run with. Word list 3 can happen in a couple of different ways. I have dice and I have cards here. I also have a giant dictionary. So I roll a set of dice and then I arrange them. I have 3 on top and 2 on the bottom. The top number is a page number. The bottom is going to be the word on the page. So if I have 441 and then 25, I need the 25th word on page 441. In this case, that just happens to be elective. And then we go again. So in this sequence, we're really using a little bit of chance and a little bit of arrangement here. I get to pick where the dice go. That gives me the option for control. For instance, if I put the number 61 at the bottom, chances are I'm not going to find a 61st word on a dictionary page in terms of the actual words that are being defined. If you do this with a different type of text, you can always just count words. You could certainly find the 61st word on a page in a novel. You're not using the defined words, you're just using any words. So there are options there. There are bits of flexibility. If you have a really long book like a dictionary, you might also need to arrange maybe 4 of the dice on top so that you have quadruple digits. You can also add things. You can change the order of the dice if it's not working. There are a lot of different opportunities or abilities when you're using the dictionary. This exercise also works really well with textbooks or really dense texts that have a lot of unique words on a page. You're looking for words that you might not use very often. And that's why I like using the dictionary, but there are a lot of other options there. You can also do this activity with cards by laying out cards. You can do the 3 and 2 arrangement. You can also try a different arrangement. I like to leave the joker in the deck because then I get to choose whatever number I want to fill that space. So if I have drawn a 9, 7, 6, and then a 4 and the joker, I can decide which between 40 and 49, which word I want between those on the 976th page. And again, any other arrangement is going to produce a completely different word as I'm moving through and as I'm counting. And I will admit that on some dictionary pages, anything in the 40s is a little bit of a chance. I might not have that many words on a page. But if that happens, then I can always shift it. I can change it. It doesn't have to be a complete rule in my version of the game. I can do basically anything that I want, anything that I want to try. This does come into play, though, if you are drawing high-level cards. So if I draw a queen and a king, I'm not going to have a 1,213th word on a page. So if I draw those for my word numbers, it might choose instead to get the 12th and the 13th word or something like that. So with this activity, you don't get as many words. This is more of an inspiration or a prod as opposed to a raw material word bank. But it still gives you quite a few things to work with, some really interesting words that you can use to create something in combination or to title a poem, for instance. There's still a lot of options. People who have visited me or see me when traveling know that I am obsessed with variety puzzles. These books published by, for instance, Penny Press that you can pick up in the magazine sections, they come out monthly, but you can get them in a wide variety of forms. This is also a great activity for creating word banks. Here I've selected a scoreboard puzzle because that is completely generative and it's based on letters, but it also has something kind of like a Scrabble board. Usually I ignore, for the purposes of this activity, I ignore numbered squares, which are worth more, and I ignore the circle squares, which are also worth extra points. I'm mainly just trying to get a word list. My tendency when I'm doing these puzzles is to plan ahead. So a lot of times I'm looking ahead to see what letters are coming and plotting the way that you would in Scrabble. You don't need to do that for this activity. Just getting a variety of words together is all you really need to do. Chance operations in poetry are not new. They probably existed long before the Dada movement in at least some form. But the Dadaists in the early 1900s made use of chance operations in art creation, a component of their anti-aesthetic practices. About Dada's role, German-French artist Jean Aub stated, Dada wished to destroy the hoaxes of reason and to discover an unreasoned order. One of their exercises has specific, simple instructions given by Tristan Tzara. Take a newspaper, take some scissors, choose from this paper an article the length you wish to make your poem. Cut out the article. Next, carefully cut out each of the words that make up this article and put them all in a bag. Shake gently. Next, take out each cutting one after the other. Copy conscientiously in the order in which they left the bag. The poem will resemble you. And there you are, an infinitely original author of charming sensibility, even though unappreciated by the vulgar herd. As Poets.org puts it, the Dadaists were deeply interested in the subconscious, and they believed that the mind would create associations and meaning from any text, including those generated through random selections. Thus, the writer and the reader both play a role. The writer is creating a poem of chance, but the reader, when encountering the poem, assists in the creation of meaning. Composer and poet John Cage is one of the most renowned proponents of chance in composition. Chance, by helping to avoid habitual modes of thinking, could in fact produce something fresher and more vital than that which the composer might have invented alone. Poetry need not be fully chance-based. Chance operations can exist on a spectrum from fully random, like throwing dice, to taking a collection of words and choosing some to create a poem with conscious input. A deterministic philosophy might argue that the product was inevitable regardless of the method. Is any act of poetry truly random? The crucial part of chance poetry, indeed, is asking questions rather than establishing answers. And so, depending on how good you are with random letters and a board, you have quite a long list. Scoreboard usually gives you a really long list. And they're usually pretty strange words. This is another one where you'd want to use a few in combination. You wouldn't necessarily want to use the absolute whole list as only your fodder. Although, if you've created a lot of smaller words like or the or something, then you do actually have some good connectives in there in order to create full sentences. The most important thing about chance operations is just to have fun with it. And there are so many more things you can do. We heard earlier about the newspaper activity of the Dadaists. You can do that with magazines, you can do that with fridge magnets. There are so many ways that you can just create words out of nothing that you can use then to write with. Have fun with chance. Don't feel like you have to think through it logically or linearly. Really push into your subconscious. Let it be tapped into by chance.